a lot of people are like, oh, like, I know how to set a boundary, but they don't listen to me. And we actually didn't even talk about it. We talked about it and then we went into something else. But like the follow-up, right? So like, what do we do after we set the boundary? A lot of us know how to set the boundary, but the person receiving it doesn't like it because, like, newsflash, if you have never set boundaries before, or or with yourself, you probably won't like it either. It's a change, right? This person or yourself, you're not used to kind of these new ways of being and these new quote rules, and so there might be pushback, and especially with family and the people closest to us who you think would be supportive, they're actually the most reactive, and has a lot to do with triangulation and family systems and all this nonsense and trauma. But if we could simplify it, like, what do we do if we're struggling with people in our life who are not accepting our boundaries, or if we've set the boundary and we don't know, and they're difficult, and then we just drop it because we don't know what to do next?
Yep. So through all of my years of experience, I have really 3 pillars when it comes to boundaries. And these 3 pillars kind of came about when I was working with families around parenting, because I was seeing parents needing to enforce boundaries with their kids. And a lot of times they were like, what do I even do? So the kids were running amok. The parents were so frustrated. The kids aren't listening. I'm like, of course they're not listening, because what are your boundaries? There are no rules here. There are no limits. Like, who is the parent? So to help them really step into their power and set boundaries. So this goes to everyone, because we all need to set boundaries. The 3 pillars that I swear by is the first, structure. So you need structure around creating that boundary. So when we talked before about like the 0 to 10, where are we? Where does this boundary fit? That's kind of where you get the structure. How can you structure your life, or structure this boundary to fit your life for what you need? And then the second is consistency. And with consistency, getting really clear on your boundary. What do you need? Because like those parents who were just like, I want my kids to listen. Like, okay, then we're going to need a lot of consistency with that, but there might be a lot of different boundaries. So if you can kind of hone in on your one boundary so that you can stay consistent with consistently enforcing that boundary, because the third is follow through. Yes, you need to follow through. Like, we know we can only pay attention for 30 seconds. Like, if you're going to set a boundary that might take, 45 seconds for you to say, that person, is already distracted. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to say this boundary multiple times.
And the more like longer you've known the person and you've acted differently, like maybe you didn't have this boundary and they're used to pushing it, like the more they're going to be like almost like children who like try, oh, are you tight with the boundary here? Are you tight with the boundary here? And they'll go like on either side and they'll try and push, and like they'll see, and then they'll go, okay, I get it. This isn't changing. So you kind of have to show up for the gentle, like, nope, like push them back. Nope. That's this still here.
Yeah, I work with so many women who are working on enforcing boundaries with their mothers. And it's
yes,
so funny. Every time they're like, well, I set the boundary. We came up with the structure, and I set the boundary, and even the next week she pushed my boundary, and I followed through. I was consistent and I did it again, and she still didn't listen. And that is where I just have to sink into my feminine and remind them that this is going to take some time. We're going to need to say this again and again, because mom's going to be like, no, I'm the mom. I can do whatever I want. It's like, no, but mom, I really need you to listen to my boundary, and can you please respect this? And I will keep reminding you because I love you, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other like follow through part is consequences. And that all these can be quite as nuanced as well, right? So let's say, it's really great. My mom and I work through so many boundary things, and now we're at like such a beautiful space, and we have such a close, like deep bond. I feel so close with her and so respected by her, which is really important for me. And mom, if you're listening, I love you. And thank you for being patient as I explained my boundaries to you, because it was not easy for her to adjust. And I really honor that she showed up for that, because not everybody does. But like, I just want to say the other side of that is like, you just step away from the relationship a little bit. You give a little distance as the consequence. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. And there were times where I had to really distance myself because there were things that she would bring up that I just told her I didn't want to talk about, or, things like, a big thing for me growing up was like my weight. I've always been, a mid-sized gal. And like, for the aesthetics of the time, it was like Atkins diets and really skinny models and like all that stuff. And, so growing up, like I had a really bad relationship with my body that I've worked really hard on protecting now and cultivating a really loving relationship. It took years. And so, not to hate my body. So, when she might say, she used to say, oh, don't you want to like get a salad versus like this sandwich? And I'm like, I really don't though. Little things like it was out of support. Like she just, in her perspective, in her time, it was like you had to look a certain way. And now we're really reclaiming that like body image, like body positivity, like looking any way we fucking want to now, but that's not how it's always been. And so it comes from a loving place, and it's also like brings up childhood wounds. And so the boundary is like, hey, do you mind if we just like not talk about food or calories or working out? Like, it just is really hard for me. Brings up like some of my disordered eating habits and like binge eating things, and I just don't want to feel icky. And it did take a few times because these processes are unconscious. Like things just pop out of people's mouths. It's not like they're like, I'm going to intentionally hurt you. But then you have to be like, hey, you know what? Why don't we talk about something else? Oh, you know what? I really don't like talking about this. You remember we talked about, like kind of like not talking about this topic. And then usually it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I totally forgot, whatever. But if they do not respect that, you kind of do have to take a little energetic step back and say, you know what? I'm going to take a step back. I love you. I need some space. And just that removal of you from that person's life, not even life, but just energy, because you're not like cutting them off. You're just kind of taking a step back and not being so available. They're going to say, oh my God, I don't want that. And I better show up for this boundary, because that's how this person will be back in my life. And it is about protecting your energy. It's not about making anybody feel bad. It's just like, you need to feel safe, and you deserve to feel safe.
Right. And in that space too is where the understanding can happen. So, I have been placing this boundary with my mother for years, because I just recently discovered my mom is a Manny Jen. So she has all the energy, even though, she's still like, she's not outwardly exuding energy, but she has that energy to do stuff. Where as a projector, as a non-energy being, I don't.
I'm a Manny Jen, and I'm just thinking about being a projector, being raised by a Manny Jen, and like how bad, Scott, how that was.
Right. It can be exhausting, especially when it's just me and my mom in the house together. I was raised by a single mom. So, luckily I had her energy to feed off of. But when she's only coming for a weekend and she's like, we're going to do these 10 things today. And I'm just instantly overwhelmed. And I'm like, can we do a little bit of a reality check here? Like, can we really get all those things done? And please remember my boundary that I need to take a break. I'm not one to take naps, but like, I need to go sit down in front of the TV for at least 2 hours and zone the fuck out. And it was only the last time it was cold, so early spring, that my mom came up to visit for the weekend. And she's, of course, talking about all the things we're gonna do. And she could see just this kind of almost like dread wash over me, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be so burned out. And in that space, you could see her understanding. It finally kind of clicked, where she looked at me and she was like, oh, you need time to rest. I recognize that. Let's make sure that you have a couple hours to spend by yourself this weekend.
I love that.
And just like the exorbitant amount of love that I had in that moment for my mother, for seeing me, for seeing my needs, and respecting the boundaries that I've been trying to place for years.
That must have been huge just like, it seems like a small thing, right? But energetically, it's like a huge, like almost like a,
yeah, it was a relief. Like, wow, I can finally stop trying to meet her energy and then be burned out, incapable of doing anything afterwards. And then taking literally for me days to recharge, to get myself back to a place where I can function and do what I need to do on my own.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so great to hear these stories, because I think a lot of people are afraid to step into this space of, boundaries, and especially with family or parents or siblings or partners, and the people that we're closest with, because we're so afraid of them rejecting us and abandoning us. And look, it's not that that doesn't happen. Some people are just really not willing to meet us where we are. And that is a grieving process if you're willing to let that kind of go for inner peace, which to me is worth it. Because why keep forcing yourself into a situation where people are going to punch you in the face? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Consider, like you mentioned before, the consequences. That's a realistic consequence that you might face by setting a boundary with someone. And that's something to really think about, when we're creating that structure around setting that boundary, really thinking, am I ready to set this boundary knowing that I may lose this person?
Thanks for watching, you guys. If you enjoyed this, click here to check out the full podcast episode. Click here to check out our full library of podcast episodes. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you can be the first to know when we're posting new ones. I'll see you soon.